Hello, welcome to the channel and thanks for watching. Now if you watch the channel for a while you know that I've been doing a Nurgle demon army and these videos have been dropping in between other videos as we're going through on the channel, and I thought it'd be a bit of fun to show you where the force is at so far. This is 1900 points of Nurgle demons. The army is going to be 3000 points. There's one model left to add to this army, and that's a model that I've been referencing in the background of other videos for 2 to 3 years now. Big intimidating project that I keep putting off, but it is going to get done for this big event in January. It's one of the reasons I've never done any Nurglings in the army, and I'll talk about that kind of thing a bit later. But here's where we're at. So 30 Plaguebearers, 4 Great Unclean Ones, 2 Soul Grinders, a Demon Prince and a Sloppity Bile Piper. So it's kind of a strange, smallish army, lots of big things in there, very much inspired by a friend's Khorne demon army, and also started off by the fact that I bought a Great Unclean one to do a kit bash with. So it's kind of an army that's organically grown, and hopefully you're going to like what I show you, and then when the big reveal comes, hopefully you'll like that as well. Let's take a closer look at some of the models in the army. So obviously you've seen 3 units of 10 Plaguebearers, done with the banner bearer, the musician, those kind of things, and done as like the rest of the army was, in not quite a speed paint format, but essentially that, with a lot of contrast paints being used alongside standard paints to get the army on the table sort of fairly quick, fairly effectively, I think very effectively, and I really like how they've all come out. So gone for the classic kind of green skin with Nurgle, which you will obviously see in a lot of places, and I've played off the tones of that throughout the entire army, really focusing on the kind of Nurgle greens. And I do think the Nurgle models are fantastic and give you so much detail with, you know, intestines spilling out, pustules and boils everywhere, rib cages, and I think Nurgle is just a fantastic army if you like that kind of really good level of detail built into the models, but actually detail that's not too hard to paint, because again, Nurgle is incredibly forgiving in terms of make a mistake, you're okay. So those are the Plaguebearers. Moving up to the Sloppity Bile Piper, which I think is one of the best models, I think, just ever. So characterful, so fitting with that kind of craziness of Nurgle. I didn't go completely crazy with the colour scheme, a little bit of yellows and reds on there, but nothing too out of the ordinary. So that's the kind of frontline troops. I'm not going to go into the rules, I'm not going to talk about how effective they are on the battlefield, that kind of thing, because really it's more for what the army looks like, and also this army is really a carbon copy of a friend's sort of Khorne demon army that he pulled horrible demon dirty tricks, and I thought if you can't beat them, why not join them? And again, it just, I go for what the models look like, how cool they are, and if they're effective on the battlefield, then all the better, and if they're not, it's all about a bit of fun. Now this army is going to be expanded with one more model, so this is currently 1900 points, as I said, and it's going up to 3000 for a tournament in Warhammer World in January. One more model to come. I keep teasing this model, and I hope I'm not building it up to anything too massive, but hopefully it's going to be impressive and it's going to be a real centrepiece for this force. Now that means that model is 1100 points, so anyone any clue what that's going to be? I think a few of you probably already know. Right, and this is the Demon Prince anyway, so this is probably the latest model I've added into this army, the 4-year-old Demon Prince, and really epitomises Nurgle. It's disgusting. It's gross, and actually the model I'm doing next is going to take some inspiration from this model in how it's going to be sort of finalised. Now we're moving on to the bigger parts of the army, so I'll move these out of the way and we'll come back when I've got them laid out. Okay, so the Great Unclean Ones. Now a lot of people would have maybe one Great Unclean One as a centrepiece of their army, and I started off with Rotigus, and really he was only going to be the one Great Unclean One I was going to do, because I got him to get spare parts for a night kit bash, and that really was what I was using them for. Then thought, wow, actually this model's fantastic, when I painted the Rotigus up for my army. And again, I painted the Rotigus because I needed the sword and the other pieces for a kit bash that's on the channel again, so you can check that one out. But quite a nice kit bash, I think. And then I used that kit bash in a game with my Death Guard against the Khorne demon army I mentioned before, and thought, just using multiple not Great Unclean Ones because it was Khorne, but they used Bloodthirsters, but using multiple greater demons in an army was just hilariously fun and a bit vicious. So I thought, right, I'm going to add to the force. So I did Rotigus first. Again, all the paint schemes are on the channel. Quite pleased with how the very quick wet blending of the kind of staff that he's got here was, and I liked how the skin went and the mouth and everything, so I'm quite pleased with that colour scheme. My first probably big experiment with using contrast paints onto a large model, so really pleased with how that went. Can't remember the order I did these in, to be honest. But then we've got the other variants, and again, these are build variants exactly from the box. I do keep thinking in the back of my mind it would be fantastic to have 7 Great Unclean ones, and actually there's probably lots of options you could do to kit bash these as you're building them. So I'm not saying that's going to happen on the channel, but I do keep thinking about it. But in theory, I'm only going to go to 3,000 points with this demon army, and I'm going to show you a couple of bits at the end of the video that is what's coming next for this demons, without revealing what the big final model is. So again here, slightly different, sort of a pale blue skin with the kind of yellow fatty areas rather than the pink areas that you've seen on Rotigus. So just painting the same model but in slightly different ways to hopefully make it stand out, and again with the extra weapon options and things as well, that will. Also started using Nurglings for the first sort of time really on models. Even on Rotigus you'll see that I didn't actually put any of the attendant Nurglings on. I did put one on here, and through the whole of my Death Guard army, I mean, I've done 20,000 points of Death Guard, I think it is by now. Some have left the collection, some are still in it. I've done Knights and things. Never use Nurglings because, again, saving them for a special project, which hopefully is coming up soon. So that was that Great Unclean one. A little bit of a closer view at this one. And I hope the lighting is better because I'm sort of doing close-ups so you can get a better idea of the paint scheme, but it's still not coming out properly. I think this is probably what everyone thinks of as the classic Great Unclean one. Probably the build variant you see on the boxes, it's what most people go for, and I think it probably is in some ways the best of the, well, definitely the best of the plastic builds. I just think the face is fantastic. Again, when I first got Rotigus, this was the head I used on the kit bash for the Knights, and just the classic combo of the sword and things. And again, the probably second or third time I've actually painted a Nurgling onto a model. So again, showing you how I've painted the fatty areas and taking inspiration from both of the paints I've done before. So obviously here I used sort of purpley details on Rotigus, and then on the next Great Unclean one here, we've got the yellow fatty areas and the yellow thing area. So on here again, just a combination of the two with a slightly darker toned green going on there to make him look a bit more like the Plaguebearers that obviously make up the bulk of the force. That's not the last Great Unclean one. I actually picked up what I think is possibly the best Great Unclean one. Not so sure. I'm still bouncing between whether I prefer this or whether I prefer the plastic ones. But this is the Forge World Great Unclean one, discontinued. I think the reason I think he's better, I think the head, you can see where the plastic one's taken inspiration, because I think the Forge World one came first. The head just looks that little bit more vicious, a little bit more grim. Yeah, and again, the skin and the tones ties in very much, I suppose, with the Demon Prince when you look at all the kind of damage and pustules and horrible nurgly bits going on there. I think it's, possibly my favourite between them. But again, I do keep bouncing around, so I'm not 100% certain. But I really like how damaged and bruised and mottled the skin is. Again, I'll be taking inspiration from that for my final big build. Really nice exposed kind of backbone there. I've taken some castings of this so that I can use that in, again, future projects, and I really like what this Great Unclean one looks like. Now, you think the Great Unclean ones are the biggest part of the Demon Army, and I suppose they are, because the Soul Grinders, which are the last two models to show, the original sort of Soul Grinder is actually smaller than the Great Unclean one, so if you compare them side by side, I mean, it's on a larger base, but you would say actually a Great Unclean one is volumetrically, I think, larger than the Soul Grinder. I think the Soul Grinder is a fantastic model, really, really worth getting, and an interesting part and a way of tying in the kind of Death Guard part of my army with the mechanical parts and the demon side. So when I painted these, again, contrast paints for most of the army with a sort of light sepia wash, and then these ones, contrast paints and things for the torso. But then the actual all mechanical parts I painted very much like I paint my Death Guard. So a little bit more on cracked and damaged armour, a bit of rust, different wash stages and whatever. The thing that ties the whole army together is the bases being done very similar. So it's that. Now the last model I'm going to show, this is why I say the Soul Grinders are technically smaller, but in a kit bash. And I think this is probably my favourite part of the army. I said about my favourite, which my favourite Great Unclean one is, but I think this is my favourite part of the army because part of the hobby I love more than anything else is kit bashing and creating weirdness. And I think hopefully you'll agree that this Soul Grinder is definitely kit bashed and is definitely weirder than the original one. And you can sort of see which parts I've taken because these are spare parts from various of the Great Unclean one builds. So we've got the sword from, I suppose, the classic build here, we've got this head area is actually from Rotigus's hand, and then I've taken some spare parts from around the torso and done a lot of milliput and stuff. So that's a sort of closer look at the vast majority of the army, or the whole army. Again, one model to come, but I do have a few demon models that I have picked up recently that I just think I'll show you through. Now I do have on internet order the new Grandfather's Gardeners, which is Warhammer Underworlds models, but I'm going to fit them into this army really nicely. Not actually in the army, but on the base of the next special model that's going to finish the army off. How many times can I mention this in one go? These are the last two sort of proper boxes. I've got Nurglings. So you can't believe how expensive Nurglings are. I have actually got dozens and dozens of Nurglings that will appear on the channel that have been saved from everything I've ever done from Death Guard or Demons that are going to make an appearance. But I wanted some more, wanted some extras, and I wanted to kind of use these models here. I also picked up a Beast of Nurgle, and I'm going to do some experimentations with this that will help me in the final big model that I'm going to add on. But also I'm going to put one on the base of it, and one for the army as well, because with the points that these are, it will take this army from 1900 to just about 2000, which will mean I can do a 2000 point game with the army as well, even though it's intended for this big 3000 point game kind of in Nottingham. So these are two things that are coming, and Grandfather's Gardeners, and that is the army. So a quick final fly past, just showing the Great Unclean ones and the Plaguebearers. Hope you liked that video. If you did, like, comment, subscribe, all that kind of YouTube jazz. And obviously coming up on the channel at some point is going to be the bits I've just shown you, the extra add-on bits, and the final big project reveal. And I hope it's going to work, because I think I'm building this up to quite a level. So yeah, see you again.